In this video, I'm going to discuss how you can apply what we talked about in approaching a design problem to a specific problem, and we'll look at our first assignment as a way of thinking through the design process. So you need to critically examine the problem or the brief in order to really understand what that problem is, and then how you can be inspired, what research you need to do, what feedback you need to get. So what's the communication goal of the problem you've been set? Are you aiming to inform, sell, persuade, maybe evoke a feeling like empowering? Maybe you want to influence people, you're selling something. Maybe you're motivating them or something else. So you need to know what it is that you're trying to communicate and who you're communicating to. There may be more than one intended audience. Sometimes the communication goal is slightly different depending on the audience. For example, ads sometimes might be trying to sell to two different markets, and they might be trying to, with the same ad, get two different feelings depending on who it is who's viewing it. And then there are oftentimes specific design requirements, or maybe there's specific visuals you need to incorporate that are provided by the client. Are there some branding guidelines you need to adhere to? Obviously, in art class, I'm going to be setting specific requirements and constraints you need to work within. Together, all these considerations should inform the approach that you take and the tools that you end up using. Again, in this class, I might be telling you what tools you need to use so that you get to know them, but usually when you're out there on your own, you're going to get to pick. That you should pick based on what's going to be the best tool to help you achieve your communication goal. So here's an example of how requirements might influence design. This image is from Phonogram. It's an illustration by Jamie McKelvey, and it's from a comic book series that was written by Kieran Gillen and illustrated by Jamie McKelvey. Now, Jamie McKelvey's style is very unique. You can tell the work that's his. And this is from a piece where in Phonogram, music is imbued with magic. Now, it's unsurprising then that Jamie McKelvey's work would intersect with those musicians. So, for Church's first album, this is a band called Churches. I'm not sure whether or not you guys will have heard of them. I can never tell if my cultural references are up to date. But this band started in Glasgow, and Jamie McKelvey is from the UK as well. He was living in London at the time. Now, when the album came out, on the left here, you can see this is the album artwork. So he was approached, I can't remember who in the band, it's three people, the three people you can see on the right, approached Jamie McKelvey and said, hey, would you want to work with us on the poster for our first tour? And he was really into it. He liked the music and he liked them. And so he's like, yeah, sure, I'd be into it. Now, you can see here that the images of the three performers are very similar to Jamie McKelvey's style, but he had to also bring in the imagery from the album. But you can see that he kind of adapted it to work in his style, which is very much clean lines, whereas in the album, it's distressed. But he used the same color, he used the same graphics, and he used the same font and the logo type that they use for their band name. Now, this collaboration didn't just end with this one piece. He's actually worked on some music video work for them as well. And in the I believe most recent album, Love is Dead, you can see that the aesthetic of the band has evolved and changed a little bit over time. So the logo type's still very much the same, but they're going for this kind of glitchy look, very kind of evoked by kind of old videotapes. So this is the tour poster that he did for their 2018-2019 tour for the album Love is Dead. And you can see that he's utilizing the same kind of glitchy look, the same distorted tape that you get in the album artwork on the poster for the band as well. Again, it's still in his style. So one of the things that in here we're going to talk about is balancing your inspiration with those project briefs. So how do you keep it true to your vision, true to being a Jamie McKelvey piece, while balancing the needs of the client and the demands of the client? In the case of you've got people at the record label saying it needs to have a certain look so that we can sell the band coherently. So how do you balance these two things to have something that works both for the client and for yourself? So we're going to be working on our piece here for our word project example. Sorry, I just realized that I need to replace a slide there. So our first project is that we're going to have a list of words. These words are around space and how space is used. You're going to pick 2 words from the list, and you're going to make 2 compositions, 2 images. There's going to be 1 word per image. It's a 6-inch by 6-inch square. I'm going to work together in Canva to get that set up. I want you to think about all of the space and how you use the space. I'm going to show you some examples at the very end. You can vary the size, spacing, placement, and orientation of the letters in the word, but you can only use that word in the composition. You can repeat, omit, slice up words or letters. You can kind of play with that a little bit. We can take a look again in Canva to see how we're going to do that. But you cannot use drop shadows or any other effect. You can't use scaling, distorting it to be either wider, narrower, taller, or shorter. And you can only use the typeface Cooper Hewitt heavy. And you can only use black and white. So that's your brief. You're going to express the meaning of a word in a composition. You're going to have to do 2 compositions. You're going to have 2 words, 2 compositions. Each composition just has that 1 word in it. And you're going to have to evoke the meaning not through color, not through font choice, but only through using that particular font in the space. So you're really going to use space, which will also allow us to work a little bit with the principles and elements of design in order to talk about how using space makes meaning. So, if that's your brief, let's think about the goal, audience, and requirements in order to break down what we need to do so that we can balance that with our inspiration. So in this case, let's think about the goal. What are you aiming to do? Well, here I've taken again from the brief. You're choosing 2 words from the list, and in 2 compositions, you're arranging the word to express meaning. 1 word per composition. So you're expressing meaning, and the meaning of the words has to do with space, things like compression or transition. So you are maybe evoking a feeling in space, and you want to inform someone of that word. Who's the intended audience? And this is kind of an interesting question in this particular venue. When we get to something like making a poster, you can tell, okay, well, that's going up for people to see in a specific area, a specific community. Maybe it's around college. Maybe it's out in Springfield. In this case, this is for our class. So who are you presenting to? Am I your audience? Is your classmates, are they your audience? Are we both your audience, and do we maybe have different ideas? So consider who you're presenting to. I would say that both myself and your classmates are your intended audience here. Are we going to understand things the same way? That's an interesting thing to consider. And are there specific design requirements or visuals provided by the client that must be incorporated or adhered to? I'm your client, by the way, for the remainder of this course. So I've copied the brief again. I think there's a fair few requirements in here. I'm starting you off with a few of them. You need to design within a 6-inch by 6-inch square. You need to only use 1 word in your composition. It can only be black and white, and it can only use this 1 font. You can't do a drop shadow. You can't do any of the funky effects you can get in Canva. You can't stretch or squish the letters. So there's a lot of limitations being placed on you in order to evoke meaning, but yet there's still a lot open to you. So this is where you can get creative and play with what you are allowed to do. You can vary size. You can use the whole space of the page. How you place things. Are things, on a level? Are they up and down all over the place? Are they at a right angle? Are they at a odd angle, of 45-degree angle or something like that? And do you leave a letter out? Do you use punctuation? So these are all things to consider. All of these things should inform your approach. So think about ways in which you might want to describe your design. Obviously, the word itself is going to be in there. But when you think of things like compression, what other things might come to mind? Is compression dark or is it light? These are all going to be kind of dependent on which word you choose. And when we looked at more kind of involved projects, think about things like elegance. Are you doing things that for someone who's young or old, distressed, sporty, geeky? And depending on your approach, that will inform the tools that you use later down the line. We're going to expand on some of these things a little bit more later, but just to set your thinking up, thinking about whether you're designing for print, screen, or both. And so that might determine what formats you deliver to your client. Especially in the beginning, I'm going to tell you what formats you need to use, but by the end, I'm going to give you some options and you should pick what's best for your design. And again, we're going to get into this more later, but just as a thought, when we're not designing in a platform like Canva that auto-saves for you, you need to remember that you don't want your designs to be compressed or to lose any quality. So make sure that you're always working in the highest quality that you can. And remember, too, to always deliver what the client asks for. You might want to inform the client if you think that that particular deliverable isn't maybe the best for what they're using it for. But if they say, no, I really want it as an animated GIF and that doesn't make sense, you're like, okay, you asked for it like this. This is how I'm delivering it. Again, I'm going to tell you what I want, especially at the beginning, and we'll cover formats in more detail later. But just as a good guidance, remember that you should always give the client what they ask for. For us, we're going to be presenting 3 concepts per word for in-class feedback, and each concept must be exported out of Canva as a JPEG. And then for the final, you're going to be giving me 1 JPEG per word. So this is already giving us some ideas of the constraints we've been set, only using the word, specific font colors. You can break the word up and play with the letters, but not using effects. Overall, a lot of design boils down to working creatively within a set of limitations and making the most out of what you've been given to work with. This is part of why I start you off by setting so many constraints. So we're going to get creative with what we've got. Here are some examples of this project that were done as part of Thinking with Type by Ellen Lupton, and she worked with students at the Maryland Institute College of Art. So these are some examples. These are, in fact, some of the same words you're going to be using. Please don't copy any of the examples, but it gives you a sense of how, even with a very minimal set of things you can do, you can achieve some really interesting results.